Good morning. So yesterday we were out wood shopping and found this gorgeous piece of walnut with wormholes in it and kind of a chip off the front. I was thinking that because it is a little over 4 feet, we could make a couple really cool shelves, box this end in, and do an epoxy pour. First thing we're gonna do, I got the planer all set up. We're gonna plane it flat. I already measured it. It's pretty good edge to edge, so that's really not gonna be a concern. We will run it through the joiner over there at some point, just to make sure it hugs the wall good, but let's get started. All right, other side's already planed down. We got one more pass on this side. I want to videotape, show you all what's going on. Just knock those spots off. Planer's noisy, but what we end up with is a relatively flat minus some sanding mark. We'll have to get some out of sanding. We're gonna measure it up to two 2-foot chunks and cut it at the so we're gonna go with two 2-foot sections. So bring this ahead, right at 2 feet. Perfect. Make sure it's good against the stops. There's the first piece. There's the second one. First one, the waste. Try to use as much as possible. I'll put it up here in the scrap pile, and we will save it for later. I'm gonna run one edge through the joiner over here off camera, and then I'll show the taping up process so that we can get in here and fill these wormholes with epoxy and build the front edge of this piece. All right, well, we moved to the basement where it's temperature controlled. Working on the garage this spring so that we have that out there as well. But basically came in and just have some red sheathing tape. You can buy it just about anywhere. Amazon sells some. I picked this up at our local big box store, but you can get it just about anywhere. And the sheathing tape is just really important to get a good base down below your wood project, because I mean, basically some epoxy is going to leak from underneath this. It's going to happen. The sheathing tape doesn't allow it to stick to whatever you use. In my case, they're just some shelving pieces with the melamine on them, but I've been using them for a while, so I laid down a fresh row of tape. And what I'm going to do here is flip the board over and tape it from the bottom to get it ready to go into the mold. So we'll do that first. Wormholes, and some of these that are actually all the way through the board, you want to tape this side off really good so that you minimize the bleed through of the epoxy. If you don't, you will get into a mess where it's just going to bleed underneath here and cover the whole board. Not only is that a lot of work sanding, it's also very expensive. The epoxy is not cheap, so we'll do that right now. Basically, this step, all you're doing is taking the sheathing tape in sections from the edge. I always work from the edge I'm starting at, moving outward. always overlap my joints. Make sure that it's good and firmly pressed down, because if not, it will bleed out. And that's the whole point in this step, is trying to avoid that bleed out that causes a lot of problems later on with your project. Again, this stuff's relatively cheap in comparison to the epoxy, so don't be afraid to put an extra row down, like I'm about to do right here, so that I get all the way to the back of the board, just to make sure that we get good seal, and there's less of a risk for bleed out. After you get that all done, you're going to have basically excess on the edges, and then have excess on the edges and all the way around the front. So I'm going to take just a razor blade, cut that off, and then I'll flip it back. Because we want these wormholes to fill up and you know, really get saturated. The other side is not as saturated with wormholes. I'm going to come back through. We're going to leave this to seal against the bottom edge, so that all those little areas fill out when we fill it. We do have to put some tape here because of this big knot hole. You don't want it bleeding out, even though it is going to be on this end. You still want to tape across this end to try to get some of these holes filled up. All the wormholes are covered. We got a good seal on this edge. The back line's clean, so we're going to put it in the mold. We're actually going to build a mold. I do have this stationary 90-degree for the very outside. And then for building some of these bridges, we're going to use paint stirring sticks. Now, we got lucky that that's about the size of this project, just under 1 inch in thickness total. But you can use anything to build these molds. So we'll get started. Okay, so the next step, and this is an important one, before we build out the mold, one thing I'm going to do is take a bead of hot glue along these edges. And it's never perfect, even though I try. And we're just going to get that stuck down, get it good and stuck down, again, to try to eliminate some of that bleed out. Then we're going to build these molds. Don't forget to wrap up whatever wood you are going to place against this. All right, guys, so we have them both taped up now. If you see, this one isn't actually glued down. You don't see any hot glue on it. We just kind of built a form up, taped it to it. Really, a couple of small knot holes in here. This corner could use a little forming, so it makes a perfect shelf. But overall, this one was pretty intact. Only a couple of pieces of tape on the back side. This one, on the other hand, we have the gap we talked about in here. Then another gap, and this whole area is filling with epoxy, and then trying to get a straight edge down here is why we spent so much time building this mold. One thing you will notice is some hot glue along here. The reason being is that I really like to have a dam there so that the epoxy doesn't spill out. This side has the lip of the dam that we built. This side doesn't have anything. Well, unless your table is 100% level, which I doubt it is, you're gonna want some protection in there just to keep the epoxy from overflowing. But we have both projects now taped up, glued up, ready for the pour. So the next video will be actually mixing the epoxy, filling it, and getting the bubbles out of it, and then demolding, sanding, and finishing. So I hope you enjoyed this. Feel free to subscribe, and more content coming soon. Thanks, bye.